Hello everyone, today we're going to do a quick painting of a cow. So I'm starting with the usual Dalerani mixed media paper. This is A2 in size. So it's a nice big pad, lots of room to work, but not monstrously huge. You know, A1, A0, it's a little bit difficult to store. So this is a good size, I think, for painting animals. It's you can make some nice gestural marks. But it's not so huge that it takes you hours and hours and hours. So I'm using a flat 1/2 inch brush, and again using the Atelier interactive acrylics with ultramarine blue for some outline work. And you can see I'm beginning to describe the structure of the cow. So I've outlined the head and the beginnings of the back, and now I'm just indicating some of the creases in the flesh that are on this particular animal. And even though I'm working from a photograph, I try to approach these drawings as if I was painting from life. So years ago I used to go to a life drawing evening class, and you'd have the model there standing or lying or sitting in a particular pose, and they would only stay there for a few minutes typically. So you had to work reasonably quickly to try and capture how their weight was distributed and the line and flow of the clothing or the limbs, whatever it was. So even though I'm working from a photo, I put these photos some distance away from me, and I imagine the cow is there in real life, and I try to work reasonably quickly, as if the cow is about to move off, and hopefully I capture some of that feeling in my drawings and paintings as well. So we've got two front legs now. Notice the sort of knobbly knees and ankles that cows have. Just putting in the line of the belly. And as I started to do that, I noticed that the line of the back was not long enough. So I'm describing the hindquarters now. Switching between that and the belly again. And now popping in some indication of the rear legs. Now, I try to be efficient where I can be. So, for example, if an animal is standing with both of its legs together, or if a person is standing with both of their legs together, I will often just describe that as one entity at the early stages. Now here I did actually put in a line which indicates the difference between the two legs, but it would have been just as efficient to, or perhaps even more so, to just ignore that line down the middle where the two legs meet and just put in the outline, the silhouette of the two limbs together. A quick bit of a swishy tail was put in a few seconds ago, and then I just adjusted the line of the back again. So I just gave the surface of the paper a quick spray with water, and I do that because I find it just lets the paint flow a little bit more easily over the surface of the paper. Certainly this first coat of paint. And I'm putting in some shadowy regions now. With some burnt umber. I typically work by doing line followed by tone and then followed by more subtle adjustments. Sometimes I'll switch it up though. Sometimes I'll just go in with a block of tone and then another block of tone and another one and then maybe put some lines in afterwards. So it's good to play around a little bit. Now notice as I've come down the left hand side of the head, I've got some curved brush strokes there to help describe the form of the head, and then in contrast to that, the nose of the cow, I've used quite flat brush strokes because that represents the surface of the nose. So it allows me to distinguish between those two regions, both in terms of tone, but also in terms of brush stroke and surface quality. Now, the paint has started to run out a little bit on my brush, but I'm keeping going using a dry brush technique now, or I guess it's not really dry brush, it's sort of medium dry brush. And that's allowing me to put in some texture at the same time. You see that one stroke of the brush up the leg that I did a moment ago. Lovely bit of texture there. And it's always random, it's always different each time. And then, but if you push harder on the brush, as I just did for that rear leg, you can put in a little block of solid shadow. So I thought for this one I would experiment with a rather more limited range of colours than I normally use. So far I've used the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber, popping in a few cast shadows on the ground here. Quick horizon line. So this painting is very much going to be a study of the animal. The background is really just there to serve, to put the animal in a location. Now what I'm doing here is using a combination of titanium white and the same ultramarine blue that I did before. And I'm putting in some background and gently and subtly adjusting the outline of the animal where it's needed. Quick time jump there, so you're not just sat watching me put in a block of blue. Now I'm coming in with an orangey colour, so this I've mixed up with cadmium yellow, still a little touch of blue on the brush, and a little touch of cadmium red in there as well, so it's kind of a browny orange. And beginning to introduce some colour to this particular cow. So the orange works quite well because it's complementary to blue. So I've got kind of a pale blue in the background. So this stronger orange, I think, bounces off of that quite nicely. So adding more orange or orangey brown to the front of the animal's body. And what I would like to do is leave some of that underlying brown showing through. But you can see I've put the paint on rather too heavily. So what I'm about to do is take just a paper towel, having sprayed that with some water, and this is one of the great benefits of the interactive acrylic, is that even after it's touched dry, you can, lift off some of the paint you've put down. And having done that, I now realise, well, hang on, I can use this paper towel to spread some more of this colour in subtle swathes across the whole animal's body. So I continue with that. And I don't know why I don't use this technique more often, and in fact I think it's something I'm going to do in the near future, is use a paper towel just to put on a thin layer of graduated tone of different colours, because you can cover such a huge area in such a short time. And you can see I'm using that same technique to soften some of the boundaries between the tonal areas on the cow's head. As you can see, you can really extend the paint a long way using this technique. So you can either spray the surface of the painting, you can spray the paper towel, you can pick up paint directly from the palette using the paper towel, pop it down with a brush onto the paper, and then spread it around using the paper towel. So lots and lots of different ways of manipulating the paint. And as I said just a moment ago, you can cover a huge surface. I'm coming in with a lighter colour now to just begin to remove some of those blue lines that I don't really want there. So it's the same orange, but it's just got a little bit more titanium white in. And the titanium white is quite opaque, so if you want to cover up, shall we call them mistakes or shall we call them first iterations? It's a good way to cover up things that you want to cover up, basically. Add some titanium white to your paint. And as it happens, that region of the cow's back is bathed in sunlight, so it's appropriate to keep the colour light there. And I'm continuing with that colour, just adding a few highlights to the animal's head. And I'm varying the way in which I put the brush down on the painting. So if I just want a line, for the most part, I will just gently place the tips of the bristles of the flat brush on the painting, like I did just then. I actually used that's slightly incorrect actually, because what I did just then was I put the brush down and gave it a little wiggle to give me a patch of colour. But earlier on, I was simply placing the tips of the brush on the surface of the painting in order to give me an instant line without drawing it. And if I wanted a longer line, what I'll often do is just repeat that motion, so you get a long but segmented line. And that will often have much more life to it than something that you draw very carefully, which has a very constant width and tone. Because generally speaking, when we're looking at things in the real world, there are very few lines which are constant in tone and colour and intensity. So by using a broken line technique, you're generally going to create a more realistic and more characterful effect. But I really enjoy the expressiveness of using a brush. You can make so many different marks and shapes and textures and tones, all with the same brush, loaded in the same way, with the same colour. So, and I think this is one of the reasons, it must be one of the reasons why, with all the electronic wizardry that we can do now, and all the incredible images that can be created, art created in the conventional way using a paint and a brush, it's still very, very popular. And I think a big part of that must be just how enjoyable the experience of using a brush and paint are, and how effective they are as well. So continuing with that light colour on other regions of the animal, put a few highlights on the hindquarters and the tail there, and then also the lower part of the rear limbs. Now I'm coming in with a slightly pinkier tone, so I've simply added a bit more cadmium red to the orangey brown I was using before. Now you can see that I'm keeping the hooves and the legs relatively ill-defined, whereas the cow's head is much more defined. So the reason for that is twofold. Firstly, I want people to look at the head of the cow. That's the focus of the painting. But also, in general, the hooves of the animal, the legs and the tail, they're generally going to be moving more often and at a higher speed than the head of the cow. Sweeping statement, So by keeping those regions slightly blurred and less focused than the head of the animal, then hopefully that's going to contribute to the sense that this animal is either moving, has just moved into position, or is about to move out of this position. And I feel that helps give the painting more life than if I describe everything super carefully. So I've just come in with some pure ultramarine blue for some of the darker shadows on the ears. And I'm using that same blue to put in some shadow regions for the eyes, and also just describe the shape of the eyes a little more precisely. Now notice, even for those quite intricate and small marks that I made for the eyes, and indeed for the nostrils as I'm doing now, I'm still using that flat brush, just using the corner and the edge of it. Now, I like trying to stay with as large a brush as possible for as long as possible, and I'm just using the tips of the bristles to put in the line of the mouth now. But, sorry, that's my cat meowing. He wants to go out. I shall return in a moment. I'm back. Okay, so I'll use as large a brush as possible for as long as possible, but it's often a little bit of a trade-off in that if you use a larger brush for a mark that is quite small, then you can often get some really cool results because you often get something which is really expressive, and use of the larger brush forces you to be efficient with your mark making, and that often produces a more effective painting. But the downside is if your brush is too large, then you don't have the precision that you need. So things have worked out reasonably well, I feel, for the face of the cow in this case. The nostrils, the mouth, the line of the mouth and the shapes of the eyes are all working quite well. But believe me, there have been plenty of cases where I've used a large brush, tried to do a small mark, and then I've had to immediately remove that mark, and I've then switched to a smaller brush. So, it's a continuing challenge to sort of work at the limit of your own skill and also the limit of what the implement you're using will also do. So another quick time jump there, I just filled in the background blue. Notice I've used kind of a cross-hatching of brush marks for the background, and now I'm going back to that paper towel technique for the ground, and again another quick time jump just to fill that in loosely. And now I have switched to a smaller round brush for the final details. So this is just a quick study. Hopefully it's going to be fairly effective when finished, but it's really mostly about form, a sense of light, a sense of movement. It's about line and capturing a moment in the movement of this animal. So I'm using pure titanium white now just to pick out a few highlights. Done the right hand eye. I put a line of light around the right hand nostril and part of the nose. Light catching the top of the right hand ear. Now, when working with highlights more generally, I tend to put a little bit more colour into them than I did in this case, but these are just a few last touches of pure white that I included. Now, because the light is coming in from the right-hand side of the painting, I use the pure white for the right-hand eye, but the left eye being in shadow, notice I've gone back to a paler orange to indicate some of the lighter regions around the left-hand eye. And I'm using that same colour on the left-hand side of the nose. So even if you use pure white for your brightest highlights, we need to be aware that in shadow regions there are highlights, but they're much more subdued than they are if the region is in direct light. So I've gone back to a mix of titanium white and the blue to put in some of the paler regions of the cow's left eye. And that's started to give a bit more expression to the face. And I'm using the same colour. They probably would be slightly different colours in reality, to be honest, but just, in terms of being efficient and in terms of time, same colour for the right hand eye. And I've now realised that I need to define the outline of the ears a little better. So I've gone back to one of the deeper orangey browns I've already got on my palette from earlier in the painting, staying with the round brush. And just refining the line of the head and the ears and the nose. And that's this one pretty much done. So just add a quick signature and then I'll pop up the high resolution image on screen for you to have a better look at. As usual, I'll put the link to this particular painting below the video in the description, so if you want a closer look at the brushwork and the textures I've used, then you can just click on that, and as usual, once you're on my website, you can click on the image and it gives you the high res zoom in, so you get a really close look at the brushwork. Anyway, if you have any questions at all, please remember to ask me in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to hit the like button, and please remember to subscribe if it's your first time here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I look forward to seeing you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.